It's time for the Post-Mortem Report with your hosts Ronald McGilray and Michael Schotter. Each month, these sultans of speculative fiction take a break from bending reality to ask one burning question. What cool stuff got buried in the social media graveyard while people were busy yelling at each other? Well, there's only one way to find out, so let's dig into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Post-Mortem Report. I'm your co-host, Michael Schotter.
And I'm Ronald McGilvray. Welcome to episode 8.
8 is great.
It's certainly, well, we'll see, won't we?
Yeah, I guess we're maybe overselling it a little bit, but that's okay.
There you go.
So how have you been, sir?
Exceptional. We've been catching up on all the snow that we escaped in the early part of the winter, and now it seems to be snowing every day.
Oh,
So
nice.
we got lots of snow.
Well, as you can see here, I have a place behind me where you might be able to store some of that snow.
Yes,
if
it's quite an
necessary.
expansive apartment. Congratulations on making the big coin. Well, being such a success, that since Post-Mortem Report's taken off, now you're really expanded.
Living La Vida Loca, yeah.
I don't think I'm getting my fair share of the revenue, though.
We can talk about that offline. Yeah, that's the nice thing about a virtual background, right? You can pretty much make it whatever you want to make it. But I thought this would be a fun way to let everybody know that I'm actually going to be changing locations after this episode. Nothing too drastic, but I'm going to be moving into a new office space. So the sound of things from my side of things might change a little bit starting next episode. So this will be your last dose of that vintage Post-Mortem Report audio before things possibly change a little bit.
Well, it'll be exciting times.
Mm-hmm.
Me, it'll be exactly the same.
Consistency is key.
The anchor of the podcast.
Indeed. Well, speaking of the anchors of the podcast, I think it's time to kick off our go-to recurring birthdays segment.
Who doesn't like birthdays?
Nobody I want to hang out with.
All right, well, let's get it started.
So what do you got for us this time?
Well, let's take a look. January 8th is Patrick R. McDonough's birthday from Dead Headspace. So happy birthday to Patrick. Daemon Manx has a birthday on January 16th. He has a new book, Arcranium, that he co-wrote with Mark Taus. So happy birthday to Daemon and all success on your new book. Neal Hock, big Carolina Mudcats fan. His birthday, January 17th. So happy birthday, Neal. Go Mudcats.
Go Mudcats.
Erin Banks, her birthday is January 22nd. Her book about rage. Happy birthday, Erin. Adam Cesare of Clown in the Cornfield and Friendo Lives. His birthday is January 27th. So happy birthday to Adam. J.G. Faherty, his birthday is January 27th as well. His book, Ragman, which was published by Flame Tree Press, is his newest release. So happy birthday and all the success on the new release to JG. Wesley Southard, They Mostly Come Out at Night collection.
Mostly.
Is out, his birthday, January 29th. So check out They Mostly Come Out at Night.
Mostly.
There you go.
I can't hear that phrase and not want to add the extra mostly to the end. I'm sorry.
Joseph Mulak, his books Ashes to Ashes and Haunted Whispers are 2 books to check out to make his birthday extra special. His birthday is January 30th. And Cameron Trost with Oscar Tremont, investigator of the strange and inexplicable. His birthday is January 30th. And I won't be saying that tongue teaser again. So check out his book or our links where you can find out his book.
Yeah, I've noticed this trend lately where you put all the really difficult to say titles near the end. That's very daring of you.
Yeah, I decided to throw it out there. So happy birthday to Cameron and all of the above. Wishing you all great success with your books, and I hope the year ahead's great. And that wraps up the birthdays for this episode, episode 8. Did I mention that already?
Boom.
That's right. Don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button. I'm going to say like 20 times. 20 times an episode.
Great. See, 8 is great. I knew it. I knew it all along. So, I think that you could definitely use a little break after getting through all those birthdays. And we've had a few different kinds of breaks on the show. We've had a bathroom break, various other things. But one thing we have yet to have is a spring break.
That's right. Michael and Ronald, go wild!
Spring break is coming. What are you going to do about it? You could join a band. Boogie! Take up a new hobby. Play with your new screwdriver.
Why, you can clean your belly button, eat olive loaf till you puke.
Or you could take a rock and roll road trip as much music as Spring Break 93 broadcast live from Daytona Beach with a live performance by Kim Mitchell. Just look at these shocking scenes from last year's Spring Break. Quit school, quit your job, sell the dog, do whatever you have to. Just miss Spring Break 93. Join us in Daytona Beach or watch it live on Much, February 20th and 21st.
So one of the things you could do while you're on spring break is catch up on your reading and your heavy drinking, but maybe reading before the heavy drinking. I don't know. You do you.
Everyone's has their own fun on the beach, I guess.
Yeah.
Just remember to wear sunscreen.
Indeed. But I know you've been doing some reading lately. In fact, you've got quite a few things to talk about this time. Why don't you hit us up with your first literary experience for the month?
Sure. Well, I've been actually mixing it up as I have been for the last couple of months, trying to get audiobooks in as well. So it's been getting a lot of books, a lot of good reads in. My first one is Horrorstor. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Is by Grady Hendrix.
So I saw it on I've seen a little bit about that book. It correct me if I'm wrong, but it has something to do with some kind of crazy like IKEA-esque furniture store that has some sort of supernatural madness going on in it. Is that somewhat on point?
Yeah, it's a horror comedy set in a retail establishment called Orsk, was spelled O-R-S-K, which is like a IKEA knockoff. And they've been experiencing, I guess, best thing, like vandalism. They're not really thinking supernatural. They're just like, it's overnight. And they don't understand how like their beds are being ripped apart and the furnitures are being destroyed, stuff like that. And it's like, who are these vandals coming in and wrecking? So the manager gets a couple of the staff together and say, we're going to stay over tonight and keep an eye on the place and see if we can find out who's coming in to sabotage
wreck shop, as it were,
their stuff. Exactly.
Yeah.
And during their nightly exploits, they meet a homeless person named Carl, who actually has been living in there. He comes in, guess he hides in the bathroom or what have you, and comes out at night and wanders around, sleeps in their bed and whatever. But it ends up he hasn't really been doing anything bad. But there is an entity that eventually shows up, and it ends up that, I don't want to say too much, but the Orsk was built on an old prison and it had this really bad warden named Worth, and they're all long dead, but they are not gone, and they use some kind of portal to get into Orsk overnight and cause mayhem, and mayhem is what happens. So the warden and his minions up against the employees of the minimum wage poor workers of Orsk.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can't really say it is really kind of cool, and they have throughout, because as I heard it's the same in the book, but of course I had the audio book, is they have commercials for Orsk throughout the story, and as the story goes along, the commercials get more darker and darker. So that was a really interesting concept. Anyways, I had a blast listening to it. I had no idea what to expect. I'd heard good things about Horrorstor before, but I'd never really got around to reading it. And just one day I saw an audiobook came available. I thought I'm going to grab it and listen to it. And it was fun.
Yeah.
Very different.
Sounds like it would be. I like the whole premise of the place being built somewhere and it not being an Indian burial ground, right?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you said, "Oh, the store was built on," and of course my brain immediately goes, "Indian burial ground? Indian burial ground?" No. Okay, great. That's great that it's something that's not that. So I'm already on board. But yeah, it sounds like a very cool premise for sure.
And because of what happened at the prison, it kind of, that's why I couldn't go too much more into it without spoiling it. But it has, there's meaning. The prison, that idea works really well with the story because what happens. So, so I would not suggest applying at Orsk.
No, you're thinking almost any other minimum wage job would be better. You're better.
Well, at least at that specific one.
Maybe at a different branch, different location, perhaps. Things are a little less
violent.
Tumultuous.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you? Did you read anything exciting this month?
Well, I actually haven't been doing a lot of reading this month and over the past couple of months because I've just been so crazy busy with other projects. However, there have been a few books that I've read fairly recently that I thought were worth talking about and that we definitely haven't talked about on the show previously. And actually, when I started thinking about it, it occurred to me that another good thing about talking about these books would be that we've never really touched on nonfiction on the show previously. So I thought it might be cool to throw out a couple of the nonfiction things I've read recently and see if people might be interested in those. So the first one I'll do before I toss it back to you is a book I read about a year or so ago called A View from My Seat, My Baseball Season with the Jumbo Shrimp by Armand Rosamilia. And
what's wrong with Armand?
Yeah, Armand's a person who we've mentioned on the show a few times before in various contexts. And he's definitely one of the more prolific and varied writers that you're going to find out there in terms of all the different things that he's taken a stab at over the years. And so one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is that given that he's kind of known primarily for being an author of horror and other sort of like speculative fiction offshoots, it was kind of interesting to read something of his that was nonfiction. So as you might expect from the title, this book is basically just about him telling stories about baseball in the context of him watching the 2017 season of the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp minor league baseball team as a season ticket holder, and kind of framing his sort of coverage or play by play, if you will, of how that all unfolded in the context of his sort of lifelong love affair with the sport of baseball. So sort of going all the way back to his childhood and like how baseball was always like a part of his family and stuff like that. And obviously I don't want to talk too much about like the specific stories and whatnot that he gets into, because that's kind of part of the point of the book.
Right.
But just to let you know that like it's kind of doing a couple different things simultaneously, right? It's telling you the story of that season of that particular minor league baseball team, but also couched in this sort of treatise or like love letter to baseball as a sport. So I definitely enjoyed it. It was a really good read. It's definitely one of my favorite things of his that I've read. So I would definitely recommend it for sure. And I would say the other thing about it is that's kind of interesting is that he actually managed to get access to a lot of the people involved in the team for reasons that I won't spoil, that he talks about in the book. And so as a result, he gets to interview and quote, various players and like the announcers who call the games. And like you can really get a lot of the behind the scenes of what was going on with a lot of stuff as well, which I thought was some of the most interesting stuff in the book. And it really goes to show how having that access to those people would make what's being talked about that much more interesting and compelling. So yeah, something a little different, something a little outside the norm. Like I'm not a huge sports guy as a general rule, but like baseball is definitely one of the like handful of sports that I do tend to have some like affection for and like interest in. So that was, I thought, a really good example of like a cool baseball book.
That's interesting. I mean, living down south like he does too, I mean, it's perfect area for baseball, like all season long.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all year long. Here, very limited in our baseball capability. So
yeah. Do you guys even have a baseball team or any kind of baseball leagues or anything up there?
We have, well, in Canada, we have the Toronto Blue Jays,
Mm-hmm.
which is a big team. But I was always, when I grew up, I was a Montreal Expos fan.
Mm-hmm.
But then they ended up closing down. And after that, I mean, I was all caught up in the whole Blue Jays run when they won the World Series a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's I mean, I can watch it, but I was never a huge baseball fan.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's funny because for me, like the actual act of the basic plays of the game is less interesting than the strategy of kind of how you arrange the batting order and the pitching and all that sort of thing. Like that's the part to me that I find most compelling, is just like sort of the statistical aspect of it. And it's like, how can you set all this stuff up in a way that's most likely to produce a good result? Because when you break it down, like baseball is actually a pretty simple game in terms of like the moment to moment plays. And so you really have to get into like the subtleties and the details of, how you can tweak things around that simplicity to produce a result. And I always find that to be like the really interesting part. Like, this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, right? But like, I really like the movie Moneyball, if you've ever seen that, where it's like they're talking about like how to basically build a baseball team from, less than stellar prospects.
That's interesting. Well, I know even growing up, the friends who liked it, they were all like into the stats, RBIs and this and that, and they had like spreadsheets. So I think that really sort of attracts a lot of people, the sort of analytical part of it.
Yeah, for sure. Spreadsheet nerds are totally into that stuff, I would think. Yeah.
I like football. Give me the ball. Nice and simple. Get down that field.
Nice.
So
yeah, I can deal with a good football game too. I can get on board with that. I'd say probably my top three sports are probably in order. Probably hockey's probably my favorite, followed by baseball, and then probably American football. not to be confused with the other football, which is actually soccer. I don't care what anybody says. Anyway,
Well,
quite the
so
tangent.
thumbs up for Armand.
Oh yeah, good times. That's a good book. People should definitely, if you have any interest whatsoever in baseball, like I think that's a book that most baseball aficionados would appreciate.
Is like each chapter like one game kind of thing?
Yeah, so he does it a few different ways throughout the book, which I actually kind of appreciate, because it doesn't really tend to get samey until near the end, where like at a certain point he's just kind of gotta get you through the rest of the season. But what he tries to do, I think, pretty effectively is sort of intersperse, his little anecdotes and stories and stuff that he's telling about his personal experiences with the sport versus what's going on in the season, right? So in a given chapter, he might tell a little story or whatever, and then tie that into what's going on in the games that were recently played, in the season. And in some chapters, he might just sum up like 3 or 4 games that are, relevant, if they were, say, on a road trip or something like that. He wants to cover the whole road trip in one chapter. And then, if the stats stuff starts to get a little heavy, he'll maybe do a little aside and do an interview with one of the people from the organization or whatever to kind of mix that up a little bit. So, like I said, the accounts of the actual baseball season are spread out enough that at least until like near the end of the book, you don't really see too much of that all at once. And then, like I said, at a certain point, it kind of just needs to wrap up. So you get like a lot of that like closer to the end. But
I guess you don't want to give it away and tell me if the Jumbo Shrimpers won their season.
Oh, that's a spoiler. That's a heavy spoiler. I'm not going to do that. That's crazy talk.
Crazy talk.
Speaking of crazy talk, why don't you tell us about your next book?
All right. Well, the next one on my list is The Loop by Jeremy Robert Johnson. It's basically a government experiment gone wrong in a small town in Oregon, or Oregon, however you'd like to pronounce it.
Tomato.
Yeah. It's a group of high school misfits that would be perfectly comfortable in the Breakfast Club. They just sort of, he does a really good job looking at disenfranchised youth and, how they interact with each other and others. And then they're thrown into this horror landscape. It starts off with them sort of their day-to-day troubles that they have trying to fit in. And then one of their fellow students goes violently berserk. And soon it's not just the one, others start to come through it, and sort of a violence and mayhem ensue. And this small group trying to survive, but they're also trying to uncover what exactly is happening. So they're sort of running against time, trying to survive while they figure out what's going on, and sort of kind of like Horrorstor, where they had those commercials. This one has the Night Watchman, which is I can't actually remember if, I think he's online, or it could be like an independent radio station, but he's kind of one of those underground independent journalists that try to uncover truth, like UFOs and other kind of stuff. And they interject these reports. I wouldn't say the interviews, but like broadcasts of what he's found so far, or what they found out. And so you have the story going on, and then it's interjected with this night watchman who throws in, as an outsider, what he thinks is happening kind of there. And then we just follow the band as they try to survive. It was a fun read. When I went into it, I thought it was more like a young adult book I'd heard, but I heard it was good. So I was kind of expecting that. And but actually, so I thought it'd be a bit lighter, but it's there's a lot of gore, a lot of violence.
Yeah, I've heard parts of that book are pretty heavy, like
Yeah.
pretty intense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was another surprise. I really enjoyed it. The story was cool. If you like sort of it's kind of like a horror adventure, like Resident Evil or something. It's just, there's some government did something bad and they
as they are wont
they're
to
stuck
do.
in the middle of it. Yeah. And it's just how they survive and try to figure out what's going on. And it's interesting it's always interesting when you like from a teenager's standpoint. So it's it was a fun read. So I would suggest both The Loop and Horrorstor. I had 2 lucky reads. Both were good.
And those were both audio for you, right?
Yeah. I forgot to mention that. And both
you've really conquered this
narrators.
audiobook mountain. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a tough start for me. When I first started, I just could not get my brain to focus on listening without daydreaming. But I'm getting better and more focused on how to do it.
Nice. Well, speaking of audio, I will pick up the torch here and talk a little bit about the other nonfiction book that I recently read, which was Cured, The Tale of Two Imaginary Boys, which is the memoir of Lol Tolhurst, who is a founding member of the band The Cure. And I could definitely talk a lot about The Cure, which I'll probably do at some point in a music section down the road. But in the context of this book, one of the things that really attracted me to it is back when I was a big fan of The Cure and listening to them a lot, it was sort of in this pre-internet era, right? Where it was like, how you got a lot of information about bands that you were into and interested in was just like rumors or, something that somebody overheard at a concert or, things that were maybe like parsed out of an interview in a magazine or something like that, right? Like it was really difficult to come by like information about things like that. And, one of the big sort of like mysteries of the Cure always was like what actually happened with Lol Tolhurst, and his sort of exit from the band, because fans of the band may be aware that like, he basically got the boot, for lack of a better term, shortly before the release of their big sort of seminal album Disintegration. And there was a lot of speculation, like rampant speculation throughout the fan base as to like what was actually going on there, because obviously, as I said, this is at a time period, the late 80s, where that information just wasn't as easy to come by as it is today. And so one of the things that really drew me to this book was kind of wanting to get the story of what happened with all of that from his perspective. Now, I mean, obviously, it's going to be slightly skewed and slightly, swayed in his favor or whatever from, being told from his standpoint. But I have to say, reading the book, it feels very like authentic, and it feels very much to me like what I'd imagined that situation probably actually was like. Right. So for those who are unfamiliar, one of the things that sort of contributed to that situation was that he kind of had a pretty severe like struggle with alcoholism. And so a lot of the book is sort of explaining from his perspective what was going on with that and how it was, impacting like basically every aspect of his life, not just what was going on with the band and everything. So it was really cool to get all of that information kind of straight from the horse's mouth, for lack of a better term. And also, another thing that I think people who aren't even necessarily huge Cure fans might appreciate about the way the book is structured is that he tells a lot of really fun and interesting sort of inside stories about the music scene, right, from the 80s, that he was participating in. Like there's some really good anecdotes with people like Billy Idol and the members of Susie and the Banshees, who the Cure toured with several times. Just a lot of name dropping and a lot of like little like funny things that like the validity of them may or may not be easy to verify, but they certainly come across as being authentic, and they certainly come across as being like legit and genuine. And I just feel like the book as a whole just has like a really good feel and vibe to it. Like it just feels really well put together and really well written, and the themes of it and the sort of things that it touches on definitely stuck with me, right? Like I read that book several years ago now at this point, and it's definitely still one that like pops into my head every so often, or like really stuck with me and kind of made an impression on me.
Yeah.
And I think it, certainly a lot of that is just being a big fan of the band and being interested in their history. But I also think it's just a generally like good, well-written book.
Okay. Well, not to be totally embarrassing myself. What did he do in the band?
So he was the drummer
Okay.
for a while. And then he also played like keyboards and stuff. And like, because at a certain point they started getting into sequencers and drum machines and stuff like that. And so there was less emphasis on the percussion until they brought in a different drummer. And then that kind of changed their whole percussion style. But at a certain point, as he was kind of like phasing out as a drummer, he would do like a lot of the little synthesizer parts and keyboard parts and stuff like that.
Okay. Did he go on to do anything else with other bands of any note?
Not that I recall. I think he did have a project or two, but nothing that would have been like on the same level as that, right? Like it was, he never really reached those heights again musically. And actually I don't even think he talks about that too much, because there's kind of like a bit of a time jump in the book at a certain point, because at a certain point, like the stuff that he's going through is just so dark and so like unpleasant that he doesn't really spend a ton of time dwelling on that, right? Kind of the focus of the book at a certain point kind of becomes his sort of recovery and kind of getting himself back together, and so that's really what's emphasized, and sort of like trying to like make amends and sort of reconcile with the other people from the band and that sort of thing. So it doesn't really focus too much on his career stuff beyond the Cure, just because that's not really like the intent of the book, right? It's more about like his personal like struggles and journey and like that sort of thing. But yeah, that's another one I would definitely recommend. Like I said, if you're just a music fan in general, I think it's a good read. But if you're a Cure fan in particular, it's a very good read.
It's a must read.
Yeah, I would say for a Cure fan, it's almost a must read. Yeah.
Interesting.
So speaking of must reads, I know you actually read a physical book this month as well, because you've been a busy guy. What happened there?
Yeah, it was Thanksgiving Day Massacre by Brian G. Barry. Another good read. This one was another one I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but it's basically about Travis. He wears a turkey mask and he likes killing people.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so it's like welcome to Whitehall, where it all takes place. Travis and his friends arrive, and once again, lots of mayhem. But it's basically it's Thanksgiving, and turkey isn't the only thing that's going to get carved up.
Nice.
Yeah, they go through. We follow Travis as he carves like a bloody path through the small town of Whitehall, and he's pursued by the town sheriff named Harper. It flew by. It was I got really caught up in it, and it's I mean, to say that it's a gore fest would be an understatement. I mean,
Mhm.
this is definitely not for the faint of heart. This is a
So is this like
lot of
full on
violent deaths.
splatterpunk territory, would you say?
It's pretty, yeah, it's pretty intense. There's the deaths are gruesome.
Hmm.
But I thought he did it really, really well. It's it just the story flowed really well, and it was almost like watching a movie. I just like
You're
it
just
was like things
picturing it.
bang, bang, bang. Yeah, it was kind
Yeah.
of going on, and the way he interjected, from the sheriff's standpoint to the thing,
Hmm.
to the killers, and yeah, because I remember the first, it was the first chapter, I guess. I was kind of reading along, and I was like, okay, what's that? And then I thought, well, I won't spoil that either. But then I just thought, well, maybe it's gonna be, because it was kind of like sexy writing.
Oh,
It got into that, and
you
I was
thought
kind of like,
you thought you were in for something else. Yeah.
yeah, I was kind of going. Well, I knew that there was a killer and stuff, but then I thought that it was gonna be. I said, oh, I guess we're gonna have some kind of like like the 80s, throw in the sexy sex
The
parts and stuff.
titillation.
But it
Yeah.
was well placed. Once, I mean, what happens completely caught me off guard. I was like, well, that was certainly unexpected. And
Yeah.
then it just snowballed from there, and it was like I just couldn't stop reading it. So I'm definitely be checking out more of Barry's work, because it's I liked his writing style as well.
Hmm.
It was just a fun read. So
Yeah.
yeah, check out Terry. Check out Travis. He's a swinging guy with a cool turkey mask.
Yeah. What's the title of the book again? Uh,
Thanksgiving Day Massacre.
yeah. I like how on the cover of that book it's like Thanksgiving Day Feast or something like that, and then it's crossed out. It
Yeah,
says Massacre instead, if I
yeah,
recall correctly.
yeah.
That's pretty.
Well, I
That
guess
kind of caught my eye.
I should have known, because the guy is in a turkey mask holding a head,
Yeah. I mean, that's
and
kind
I was
of,
thinking,
yeah,
says it all.
as advertised. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah,
So
I know. Speaking of Brian Barry, I've had Snow Shark on my TBR for a while now. So that, like, hearing that you enjoyed this book will probably lead me to want to shuffle that up on the TBR a little bit, because that's another one of his that I thought was kind of eye catching.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Interesting premise. I think that was going to be one of my next reads as well. But
yeah, nice.
yeah,
Well, speaking of, you mentioned how that book kind of gave you the feel of a movie.
yeah.
Speaking of which, I think we both watched a movie recently that would fit nicely into the theme of culinary adventure.
You
You
could
have a
say
lot of
that.
culinary adventures on Thanksgiving, but we can talk a little bit about the menu. Uh, which we had this nice post here from Guillermo del Toro talking about this movie.
Yeah.
You want to set the premise up for the people, give them the kind of like the elevator pitch for what's up with this thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like it begins sort of like a fantasy island. People,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of arriving by plane, they arrive by boat. You go to this boat to this exclusive restaurant that's on a secluded island, and you're served dinner by an eccentric chef and apparently very eccentric crew that he has working for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but there's a lot more uh, to what meets the eye.
Yeah. So one of the things I really liked about this film is the fact that you really aren't quite sure what's going on. Like, right, because this definitely falls into like the horror thriller suspense category. And I think one of the things that it does really well is it doesn't tip its hand completely until you're pretty far into the film, because you can tell fairly early on that something's going on, but it's very unclear as to exactly what that is, or like how extensive it is, or what's, what is being presented to you. And I really thought that was like a very enjoyable, very cool aspect of the movie, right? That like you're really sitting there the whole time going, what exactly is going on here?
Yeah.
What is exactly real? What is exactly, perhaps a bit of theater or whatever? And I'd say the only thing that's kind of a bummer about the movie is, for me at least, I kind of feel like it's the sort of thing that once you know what's actually going on, it probably wouldn't like be the sort of thing you'd want to experience like over and over again, right? It's more of like a one and done sort of thing, I think. But that being said, I think as long as you can manage to avoid any sort of spoilers or any sort of like, excessive information about the film, it would be a pretty enjoyable experience to check it out.
Well, I thought all the acting was great.
Yeah, some really good acting, some really good scenes, really, really cool sets and like lighting, and like the way stuff is presented and shot is very cool, and like noteworthy and sort of stands out. The other thing I would say about it that I really liked is that I think it does a good job of like doing some pretty adept social commentary, and also like framing that in the context of like some good like dark black comedy. Because like there's basically I think one of the big overarching themes of the film is this whole idea of like what happens when you have people who are basically accustomed to being able to buy their way in and out of situations with money, being placed into a situation where money and influence don't actually matter. And I think like that, the whole examination of all of that is actually really interesting. And another thing that I think this film does pretty well, but in a somewhat more subtle way, is sort of a commentary on the service industry and like the idea of like people who are in positions or jobs where like their whole job is about like pleasing other people or helping other people, and like how that can sort of play out in like weird and interesting ways. And again, without like going into spoiler territory, I think like the way that all that stuff plays out is very, very adept, right? Like it definitely was one of those things that stuck with me and made me think about it a lot after I finished watching it. So I think like the reason I wanted to bring all that up is because I think this movie perhaps has the ability to appeal to people beyond the horror genre because of some of that adept social commentary that it does.
It's almost like a satire.
For sure.
It was like, for, I don't know. I mean, other than the fact that, I mean, some of it, you really have to disband your belief system. Like, I'm like, really? But you get caught up into the acting. But I was like, thinking about it, I was like, well, would never happen. But
well, and I think
happen,
that's part of the interesting thing about it, right? Is that there's a part of you that thinks, oh, that would never happen. But then there's a part of you that maybe knows some people who are like the people in this scenario and thinks, maybe that would actually happen.
Well, if you like film, you'll like this because the acting was good, cinematography was good, the flow of it was good. It was just, I mean, I was just captivated by the whole thing. I was just like, Fiennes was really good, and I can't think of her name now. Our main,
the female protagonist.
Yeah.
I remember her character's name was Margot, but I can't remember the actress's name at the moment.
But but she was really good as well. I thought it was great. It was almost like a play.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it reminded me. I just thought of it as like it was like watching a play, a really well done play.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely was one of those things where it's like hard to look away, right? Like you're just engrossed in what's going on because, like I said before, you're just trying to figure out like what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And kind of piece that together. But another thing that this particular film reminded me of immediately as soon as I saw the trailer for it last year was a short film that I had seen a while ago called Next Floor. Have you had a chance to see that?
No. Yeah.
So basically the premise of it is it's only about a 10-minute short. It was actually done by I'm gonna butcher this fellow's name. It's Daniel Villanueva, I believe, Canadian filmmaker, and it made the rounds at the like film festivals and stuff back in 2008, I believe. It was to pretty wide acclaim, and it's one of those films that I think has inspired a lot of other things, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to find that perhaps The Menu and some other things like The Platform may have been inspired by this film, because basically the premise of it is that there's this cadre of wealthy people sitting around a table at a banquet eating, and as they eat, they continue to put strain on the floor of the place where they're sitting, to the point where them and the table all just kind of go crashing through to the next floor. And then they have all these wait staff and servers and stuff that are kind of running down the stairs to get to the next floor to continue feeding them as they continue the cycle and just keep repeating it. And I think it's a really great like commentary on like gluttony and like the insatiable desire of people to like accumulate wealth and all that sort of thing. Again, really, really quick watch, right? It's something you can experience in like 10 minutes, and we'll have the link to the YouTube video in the show notes. But I just like every time I see a lot of these modern films that kind of tread similar ground, I always think, and I kind of wonder like whether or not they may have been inspired a little bit by that short, because it was kind of a big deal at the time when it did hit.
Yeah, well, could have. Well, he's pretty influential. I think it's Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, see, there you go.
Maybe, but because I meant to watch after you'd mentioned it to me, and then all sorts of other stuff got in the way, and I completely forgot about it. And considering I went through our list of stuff to remind myself what we're going to be going on, I was like, I even missed it then. It's on YouTube, correct? Yeah.
The link to it will be in the show notes. Like I said, it's only about 10 minutes long. So, and really, like, what I just explained to you basically is the film, right? But it's all in the execution, right? It's all in how it's shot, and like the way it's acted and the way it's, presented, I think is what's really kind of captivating and interesting about it, and potentially influential about it, I would say. But yeah, good times.
Always.
So, speaking of potentially influential things, I know it's your turn to talk about some music. What do you have for us this month?
Well, sort of to play off of what we talked about in the previous episode, one of my guilty pleasure songs was Lord of the Rings, from the album Pieces of Eight, which came out in 1978.
Yeah.
I was like 14 years old.
Back in the
what were you going to say? Dark Ages?
No, back in the. You can still say that, right?
I've never even heard of that term.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pieces of Eight. I mean, other than like the Who, the Styx is like probably my next favorite band. I mean, they're I wouldn't say they're night and day, but they're much different than each other.
For sure.
there's lots of great albums by Styx. The chorus, how they sing together, really makes the band. So there's, earlier albums that sort of got me interested in it first, but Pieces of Eight, I mean, with Renegade, Blue Collar Man, enough said, giant hits. But there's Sing for the Day, Lord of the Rings, which is my personal kind of
jam
song. Yeah. And the song itself, Pieces of Eight, which is a great song on its own. It was just a huge blockbuster for them. They just really exploded with that album. And so it had, it was a major part. I mean, I was just a young teenager, just sort of starting my teens, and this album came on. It was all the rage back then. I mean, with Styx, they had Dennis DeYoung, who was their keyboard player and their one of their main singers. He was replaced by Lawrence Gowan. Now I really like Lawrence Gowan. Well, back when I was watching him, I was independent. He was just Gowan kind of thing, and I was a big fan of him. And he does a great job with the new sort of Styx band. But it was like, I guess, our last discussion with Van Halen. It's just
you get attached.
Grew up with Dennis DeYoung, and as much as
I
I
definitely feel attached to him for sure.
Yeah. But Dennis DeYoung, I mean, his voice is just it was amazing. I mean, they say he's the godfather of the power ballad.
Yeah, because wasn't Lady kind of one of the first ones of those? Yeah.
I think it was like the first sort of power ballad that was ever done. And it's kind of neat because they have, the course, and it's, well, I wish I could have said I went to the Pieces of Eight concert, but I did not make it then. I was probably too young. The first time I saw Styx was Cornerstone. I would have been like, I guess probably around 15, 16 at that time. And I remember it was my very first concert. And I remember who I went with. I went with a buddy named Jim Goff. And
nice.
It was his first concert too. And when I left, I literally thought my ears were bleeding. It was like, it was so high pitched, so loud. And my virgin ears had never been to a concert, and it was loud and it was shrill, and my ears rang, I think, literally for a day.
Yeah.
It was
nice.
It was such a memorable concert. And I mean, I love, actually, a lot of people after Pieces of Eight didn't really like Cornerstone, but I really liked Cornerstone. So I thought it was a great album. But yeah, you a Styx fan at all?
Yeah, I definitely am into them. I would say for me, probably like my two big Styx albums that I really got into were Grand Illusion and Paradise Hotel. Like those are the two that really like clicked for me. But Pieces of Eight's definitely like right up there. Like that would definitely be in my top three for sure.
Well, Paradise Sky, they had the Best of Times. Rockin' the Paradise was a really good song as well.
Too Much Time on My Hands.
Yeah. But admit, you're really a Kilroy Was Here fan, right? Used to walk around your vast apartment back there doing your Mr. Roboto.
Yeah. It's funny, right? Because it was a famous interview with Tommy Shaw talking about like why he left the band. He's like, I just couldn't write songs about robots anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm a Mr. Roboto fan. I obligato that.
I don't think there's any song that I didn't like by Styx.
Yeah.
It's just I think I just liked every song. I mean, I remember when first time I heard Equinox with Lorelei and Light Up, I was like, wow. And then I jumped on board then. So I remember a buddy had it. I remember I saw the album with that sort of the melting glass or ice that's on fire. Well, that's a cool cover. And I was looking at that and I was, who's this? So,
Nice.
And of course, back then, if you had a friend who had older brothers, they always had the cool albums because their brothers knew more than we did, right? So,
sure.
It was like what you had to do is get a friend with older brothers to learn what the good bands were and stuff. So,
yeah. Oh yeah, the hookup.
Yeah, but Pieces of Eight was a big album. Big album for me.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good one for sure. Definitely a fun one. As soon as you mentioned it, as soon as I saw that was the one you were going to talk about, I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Because to me, like I said, being more familiar and having the other ones kind of be the ones that were kind of closer to my heart, that one is one that I would have, maybe overlooked in thinking about them, but definitely shouldn't be overlooked because it is really great.
Yeah. I wish they'd come back because I see I follow them on social media and they're like, oh, the new tour. And it's like not even one Canadian spot.
Just not even having it.
Yeah. I'd like to and especially considering Gowan's Canadian, you think he'd have some, we should go to Canada because he was here actually during the Christmas break doing his solo stuff.
Oh.
He was playing in Ottawa doing his own songs. And I was like, oh, why
didn't you bring the fellas?
Yeah. So maybe one of them had a problem at the border years ago that he actually can't get across because it seems odd that you wouldn't. I mean, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver are giant cities for concerts.
Yeah, for concerts,
lots of money to be made.
Yeah. I can't think of too many North American tours that don't hit those cities. Yeah.
Well, they're as bigger than anything you're going to find in New York in the North America, other than like New York City, kind of LA. But I mean, they're big, massive cities. So surprises me when they don't go. So there's got to be something. Maybe they hate the snow.
Yeah. But good times though. My music pick. Everyone should go out and listen to Styx, Pieces of Eight, or any of the other albums. You can listen to Equinox, Crystal Ball, Grand Illusion, Cornerstone, Paradise Theater, Kilroy Was Here. Just hours and hours of good music. Nice. The possibilities are almost limitless.
Yeah. And they've never got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame either.
Really?
I've heard all sorts of stories. I think back when they were really big, their management side tried to say, well, have more mystique, don't talk to media, don't talk to the rock reporters, just snub them. You're too good. And I think it blew up in their face because eventually, with media and everything took off and it was like, well, we don't actually want to talk to anyone from Styx. You guys didn't want to talk to us. You were too good. And the whole thing.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I just sort of assumed that they were in there because why wouldn't they be? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I guess it's the media that vote who's going to get in. And I guess it's like a punishment for them because of the way they treated media over the year that I guess their managements, I guess back then in the 60s, 70s, it was probably cool. Let's be really aloof. We don't need media. We're just going to, have the mystique about us. And it didn't work.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I mean, their fan base is rabid anyway. So no one really gives a crap if they get in the Rock and Roll. I think they should be in there, and it's a shame that they don't. That it just shows how petty like that whole thing is. I think the award just like they just do whatever. Because I saw Dennis DeYoung in Toronto at the CN, which is their big exhibition that they have in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And he was playing. It was like Dennis DeYoung sing songs of Styx,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, really? So we were in Toronto at the same time. I think we were going to go see a Toronto FC soccer game, and I thought, well, let's check it out. And I remember it was like raining, and it was like a miserable night. And my wife was kind of like, "Are we really going to stick around for this?" And then it kind of tapered off, and it started. And actually, she was blown away too. So it was another concert that I brought her to, and he was a great showman, did a
Nice.
great job, and to see him, it was a much smaller venue where it was set up, and it was so cool. Yeah, he still has his pipes, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's good to know.
But yeah, Styx. It's you start looking at the years, 78. Where did the time go?
I guess you don't actually have too much time on your hands.
No,
Yeah.
time's ticking, tick,
Yeah.
tick, tick, ticking. So
Nice.
yeah.
Well, speaking of almost limitless possibilities, that may bring us to talk about something a little unusual in the world of games that you had brought up as something that you wanted to touch on. What do you got for us?
Yes. Well, I'm going back to the basics actually on this one. I saw a post by DT Neal. It was kind of funny. He was playing chess, and that he'd had a bad string of games where he hadn't been very lucky. And I started thinking I should get back more into, because I used to play chess all the time on the board, but now you can play them. And you don't have to pay for them. There's really nice free video ones, and they have cool looking boards, and there's different kind of play pieces. I mean, you can have them as like your normal chess, or they have more elaborate. You could do like Harry Potter people or Lord of the Rings or what have you. And I started playing it, and I really did feel his post after that, because I started off playing, well, I'm going to be middle of the road. I'm not going to go crazy, play the best artificial AI, but I'll go middle of the road. And then I tried it in the middle of the road. They beat me easily.
Just stop.
So I ended up going all the way down to like the easiest setting to see what would happen. And although I did all right, I still got beaten maybe a quarter of the time by the easiest setting.
Yeah.
So, but it's I mean, I wouldn't say it's a simple game. It's simplistic in its, that the graphics and stuff, but it really kind of gets your gray matter working, having to think of like moves that could potentially happen 2 or 3 moves ahead, and to strategize and stuff. And although you're not shooting guns and stuff, it's almost like Gettysburg. You have to, the strategy of where you're going to move your person, what's that next move by your opponent going to do. And it's and there's not lots of explosions, so if you're just sitting there on a bus or whatever, you can play it and it's nice and quiet, and try to better yourself.
Although I will admit, like, one of my personal favorite versions of computer chess was always battle chess from back in the day, where they actually would animate the pieces and have them like stab each other and stuff like that. That was always a good time. That was a good way to get kids into chess. When the rook eats the piece that it takes, like that kind of increases the attention span.
Yeah, it's kind of like the board game that was in Star Wars, where you see the holograms kind of going club the.
I always felt like battle chess must have been inspired by that scene from Star Wars for sure. It seemed like that was a pretty easy correlation to make.
I never played one. I've always wanted to get like a really nice chess set, like the really nice wood, and get whatever. But I mean, I have a nice board, but it's not fancy, because the really fancy one's really excessively expensive. And I was thinking, well,
it's funny because some of those really elaborate sets, I actually find it difficult to distinguish the pieces from one another because they're so like detailed and intricate. Like I get used to like just seeing the basic shapes, right? And almost at a certain point, the more elaborate ones get almost distracting because you're so busy looking at the details of the pieces, you're not thinking about your actual moves. But yeah, it's funny the broad like range of stuff that's available there. Like you go real hard in the paint if you wanted to get a really swanky chess set for sure.
Yeah, I don't even think they're like meant for playing. Some of them are just literally works of art.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just they're so nice and ornate. It's you have that to show. If you're a big chess fan, you buy that, especially if you
just
have like
display.
A side friend. Just go, this is my fabulous, all made of marble and gold or whatever.
Set up some famous gambit in like the seventh move or something like that to show off your knowledge or whatever. Just have it sit there indefinitely.
Exactly. But yeah, with the advent of it coming on the computer, though, it's cool. I mean, you can play on your iPad, laptop, anywhere. It's just, you're looking to kill a little bit of time. It's a fun game. People, I don't think, especially young, I don't know how much exposure they actually get to chess, but they should check it out.
Well, it's funny because you said you used to be into chess back in the day. Did that have anything to do with perhaps being in a chess club in your school days? Because I know I was, but I don't know how like common or popular that sort of thing was in your neck of the woods.
If we had one.
Yeah,
I'm sure we did, but I was not part of that. I mean, I remember we had like an AV club, so I'm sure there was a chess club. So it was like a math club and stuff, but
I did it for like a year or two back in junior high and got pretty into it, but then didn't really carry on with it after that.
Yeah. Well, I had a friend that liked playing it, and so I played it with him a lot. So it was kind of that's how I learned to play. And we just, when you have a buddy that likes playing it, it makes it easier.
Yeah,
I think it probably got because the girl that's in the menu, she was in that new movie or the series Queen's Gambit, I think it's called. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure, and it's all about chess. And she's like a protege, and she's like goes from nowhere, but her brain works a certain way where she can see moves, and so she starts moving up the ranks, and all of them are like, you're nobody, you're not going to go, but she just beats one person after another and moves up the chess ranks. And I think it got a lot of new people into chess. So I know there was kind of a little craze there for a while. I don't know if it lasted, but it probably got a lot of younger girls into it as well because of the character being female.
Something they could relate to.
Yeah, but it was a really good series. Have you seen that one?
No, I have not. I've heard of it, but I had not seen even an episode.
Really clever. Yeah, she's actually a very good actress. But I digress. But yeah, chess, fun game. Anyone can play it. It seems intimidating at first, with the sort of the rules and stuff. But it's a great game. Keep your gray matter circulating.
Excellent. Well, speaking of chess, that made me immediately think of one of my favorite video game experiences, which is the Hitman series, which I always considered to be sort of like chess in the form of Assassination.
I was wondering how you were going to like spin this one.
Yeah, well, because the thing with those games, right, and the thing that kind of makes them so iconic and sort of beloved, I would say, by a lot of players, is not so much that they're about, assassinations, but the fact that like they set up these really intricate environments and scenarios that allow you to complete your task, which of course is assassinating people, but let's not dwell on that. In a variety of ways. And you can make use of things in the environment. You can set scenarios up to have things play out in such a way where your target goes down and it looks like an accident or a chance occurrence, or you can go in guns blazing, but even in that case you still have to sort of plan and deal with whatever happens as a result of that. And it always struck me, especially playing the more modern games in that series where they've really dialed things in and like the technology has really caught up with the premise.
Right.
That they have such amazing, like mind-boggling levels of detail and intricacy in those games now, to the point where it really is a very cerebral experience, playing those games, because there's so much information to take in and process and think about, like how you can go about, achieving your objective and all the different ways that can occur, and like having to kind of think on your feet and deal with like random things that might spontaneously happen while you're in the midst of executing your plan and all that sort of thing. And so I think that's another good example of a game that kind of stimulates the gray matter in a lot of ways, beyond its sort of like visceral, more like carnal pleasures.
Yeah, I can see your point now, because I guess it's just the ways where you decide how you're are you going to move your pawn, and do it like silently, or are you going to like get your queen and just go blasting into the room,
blasting into the backfield. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and then sometimes you have to back off and rethink, let things cool down, set up your defenses or whatever, let the enemy come to you, or do you go hunting, or are you gonna lie in wait and set up some sort of ambush or trap, or what have you. I think there are a lot of like probably more parallels there than one might imagine. But of course, the big difference with something like Hitman is it's all happening in real time, right? So you're literally controlling a character and moving around the environment and doing everything in real time, as opposed to taking a turn and having an infinite amount of time to consider your next move. So that would definitely be a major distinction there. But yeah, I would definitely highly recommend those games, especially the three newest ones, that started in 2016 and just finished up in this past year. That's a really great series of games that's worth checking out for sure.
I was going to say, how tough is the AI?
It varies. You can there's a plethora of settings you can adjust to like increase or decrease the difficulty of things. But I would say the default settings are pretty forgiving. Like if you just fire the thing up and start playing, I think most people would probably be able to acclimate to the level of difficulty that they present by default pretty easily. And I think if I recall correctly, in the newer games, they actually give you like a difficulty setting right at the beginning, right? They're like, do you want a more casual experience? Do you want something more challenging? I think they give you like 3 or 4 options to pick from. And then, of course, you can change that at any point. But they give you sort of like presets, that let you very easily bump the difficulty way up or down as needed.
I was thinking about that because I remember when we were discussing Alien Isolation, and when I started, I was like, "Yeah, I want the full scary." I'm like, I want the hardest part. And I was like, I don't even think I made it 5 minutes in, and that thing was like just killing me left, right, and center. So I had to eat my whatever it is that the eat crow, and had to go down a couple settings. But I think it's, unless you're like a super hardcore gamer, I think if you're playing Hitman, you should always start with kind of medium to either, so you can sort of enjoy the experience and the storyline and everything. And then when you're doing replay, see if you can actually pull it. Because if you start, unless you're like just an incredible player, you start at the hardest part. It's an easy way for you like to put the game down and not pick it back up after you get frustrated a little bit. It's like,
and I also think that a lot of the the joy in those games is playing through them multiple times, because there, like I say, there are so many scenarios and there's so many different ways that everything can unfold, that even if you play through the entire game on easy, if you go and bump the difficulty up and play through the entire game again on hard, you could do things in a completely different way. But the advantage that you gain from playing it on easy is that you're more familiar with the mechanics and the gadgets and how everything works, and therefore you're more able to actually deal with that harder difficulty, right? Because you've been through enough, in your first playthrough, that you're comfortable and confident with how everything works. Because that's what'll really get you into trouble in that game, is like when you have the idea in your head of what you want to do, but you don't have like the dexterity developed to actually execute on that, and you just end up doing something really dumb.
Is there fair save points? What's the save mechanism?
Yeah, I believe there are auto saves, but then I believe you can also manually save pretty much anywhere, because it's basically like a running simulation. So at any point you can basically hit pause and save, and it'll literally like save the exact state of the simulation at that moment, and then you can just pick up from that point.
It's not like he has to go to like a phone, pick up the phone. Like you have to find a phone booth and get on the phone.
No, nothing like that. Yeah, it's a save on demand kind of situation. And that definitely works to its advantage, because again, with multiple save slots, if you wanted to save at a particular point and then try a bunch of different things and see what happens, you have that opportunity too. So that's like another way to kind of experience it if you don't want to wait for a replay to try something different. But yeah, those games are great. Like just sitting here and thinking about them and talking about them, like they're definitely some of my favorite things that I've played in recent years, like just in terms of overall quality and polish, and just like being like really satisfying, engrossing gameplay experiences. I think there's like a lot of good to say about that series.
Probably why they made it into movies.
Yeah. Some of those movies are pretty fun popular too. Like I know the one with Timothy Oliphant, who was from Deadwood, where he plays Agent 47. That one was pretty good. I remember enjoying that one. But good times.
Yes. You have a TV series.
Yes. You're going to do the transition. Okay, I dig it.
Yeah. Well, because I didn't actually really have anything TV wise this one, so you're soloing it.
Yeah, I'm flying solo here on the TV front. So yeah, I we don't need to talk about this for too long, because unfortunately this is another one of those victims of the Netflix early cancellation syndrome, as I like to call it. But I do really love it, and I do think it's worth talking about, which is a series called Mindhunter, which is actually based on a book that was written. It's basically like a memoir of this FBI agent named John Douglas, who is basically credited for establishing the whole concept of criminal profiling in the FBI. And so the premise of the show is that it follows sort of in a fictionalized manner the whole idea of going and interviewing serial killers who have already been incarcerated to try to develop a profile of their thought patterns and behavior, in the hopes of using that information to stop or capture other serial killers before they finish their mayhem. And I really love that show. I think it was a real shame that it got canceled, because the first two seasons, I thought, in their own way, were really, really well done, and actually kind of approached things in a very different manner. So like the first season, they're basically just setting up the whole premise of this like special group working within the FBI. So it's sort of like an X-Files situation, right? Where they're like stuck in a basement trying to prove that like these theories they have are valid, and just trying to set up the whole idea and kind of get the ball rolling with it. And that has kind of a nice procedural drama feel to it, where it's like every episode they're kind of interviewing a different different subject and like trying to get information to build these profiles and then trying to use that to work on active cases and that sort of thing. But then after that all gets established in the first season, they basically spend the entire second season focusing on the Atlanta child murders and all of the stuff that was associated with that, and how like criminal profiling played a role in all of that and how it played out in reality. And I thought all that stuff was like really exceptionally well done and like really like engrossing, interesting series. And then of course immediately after that, the show got canceled. But it like what's there in those first two seasons I think is really great and really worth experiencing for sure.
Do you have any like well-known actors in it, or?
So I believe the lady who plays the doctor, the PhD, who's sort of like the stand-in for the person who's coming in and trying to establish the unit and like the trying to pitch the whole idea of the premise of profiling to the FBI higher ups, is I believe Olivia Torv from Fringe fame, if you remember that show.
Vaguely.
Yeah. That's another really great show, but we can talk about that some other time maybe. But she's probably, I think, the biggest, most well-known name in that show. But I definitely recognized the two fellas who play the FBI agents are pretty recognizable, especially like the one fellow who plays like the older, more like grizzled seasoned agent. I think he's a pretty veteran like character actor that I think I recognize from a few different things. But yeah, they're really good. Like their chemistry is really good. You know, like when they go out into the field and are like doing all their interviews and stuff, and like they kind of have this whole like push-pull dynamic going on between the two agents, where it's like they like get along, but they're not like really on the same page all the time with everything, because they've kind of got their own ideas and like methodologies about how to approach stuff. So that kind of makes for some interesting conflicts and resolutions with that. But yeah, the acting's really good. The scripts are really good. The the way it's shot, again, like another thing I'd say is a consistency with a lot of things we've been talking about lately, is everything's just really well put together and like really like nicely polished and like well executed. It's just like a really satisfying watch.
Yeah. Did they ever say why they canceled it? Or was it just one of those odd Netflix things?
I think it was probably a ratings thing, because I think it was one of those shows that didn't really blow up initially. And I think it really only took off and got really, widely like acclaimed and popularized after they had pulled the plug on it. Because I think like a lot of people kind of came to that show late.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that they didn't anticipate how well received the show would have been, because the book is very popular. And again, going back to like the nonfiction theme of the episode here, that Mindhunter book is actually quite popular in the nonfiction realm. It is definitely something that like a lot of people seem to have a great deal of affection for. So I'm not sure why they didn't think like sticking with that would be something that would pay off long term. But yeah, it's hard to say.
A lot of it too, I think, with shows like that, they're a good show, but if they go up against, or they're at a time when there's something big, like if there's like, oh yeah, Game of Thrones is playing, so everyone's invested in Game of Thrones, or everyone's invested in the Last of Us, so they'll get to Mindhunter, but it's already canceled, so then it'll blow up later on after it's been canceled. But it's it's just, if you're unfortunate that we have a no show, it's really great. What do you mean we're going up against the Sopranos? It's like, well, good luck finding viewers, because everyone's already invested in that.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends when it came out, but
yeah. Well, and I mean the thing with Netflix too is like a lot of times I feel like they send shows out to die sometimes, like where they just throw it out there and see if it sticks, and like not really push them or market them the way that they maybe could, given the purse strings that they have. But Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say what went on with that one. All I know is, the show is definitely great and definitely like worth a watch, even if you uh, only get to experience those first two seasons, because like I said, the first season it's like a feature of the week kind of format. So like each episode kind of stands on its own, and then that whole second season has a pretty complete story arc that it tells. And even though it really leaves you wanting more, like it's not like it's not you're going to be disappointed
Yeah.
in the show or anything like that. I mean, it is what it is. Um, it's just one of those things where you very easily could have seen it going on, for at least another season or two. Like there was plenty of stuff they had left to explore there.
Yeah.
But c'est la vie.
It's still on though, Netflix right now. They didn't pull it.
No,
Pull the
it's
show, but
still
it's
there.
on.
Yeah, I just checked when we were doing the planning for the show, so it should still be. I've noticed that about them is that even when they do pull a plug on shows, they never seem to take them offline. Like it always seems like they tend to linger there in the system. So if you go looking for it, I'm sure you'll be able to find it.
Yeah. Well, I guess if they paid for it,
It's free.
keep it up.
It's free money for them, right? If they can just keep drawing any subscribers they can draw in with that, it doesn't really hurt them to have it there sitting on the server.
Yeah, because I was reading an article they were talking about. I guess some of these shows that die, it's purely like for tax reasons. Even if they're doing okay but not great, they're on in the board looking at, I guess, what can we cut to get like a tax, break, because this other show is doing really well, so they just cut anyone that's just maybe mediocre, doing all right, but just not
not killing it or whatever.
Yeah.
But
it's business,
it's so hard to say. Like I'm like always reluctant to speculate too much about stuff like that, because it's like, who knows what's really going on in the Netflix boardroom. But it's a shame. And I mean, we've talked about it so many times on the show at this point, just the whole idea of like shows, that don't really get to
mature,
run their course. Or even just leave stuff hanging, in any sort of way. And but I think, as we've mentioned before, it doesn't take away from the fact that what is there is cool, right? And that's another reason why I like to bring stuff like that up, because I think once a show gets canceled, it has a tendency to completely fall off the radar for people. And so it would be a shame for people to miss out on experiencing what is there of that show, because it is really good. So that's the main reason, I think, why I wanted to talk about it.
Well, that's a show to check out. Mindhunter.
Nice. Well, speaking of shows to check out, that'll be the next episode of this show, because we've come to the end of this episode.
Episode 8
about that.
Episode 8.
Pieces of 8, one might say.
Hey, didn't even put that together.
Yeah.
Now I'm embarrassed.
That's what I'm here for. I'm here for you, buddy.
Yeah. So are we going to bow out doing a duet of one of Styx's songs? Maybe we could do Lord of the Rings. What song you comfortable singing? Hard pass?
Maybe I'm going to leave.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say, I'm losing my connection. And the screen was going to go black. Yeah.
Anything could happen.
Yeah. You'd have to have a lot of guts to try to pull off a Styx song.
Yeah, I do not. Especially in this big open room, right? Like it's just going to make my voice reflect all over everything and just amplify the awfulness. Amplify the Awfulness would be a great cover band name.
Yeah. It's a great name for for an album.
Yeah.
Well, when we start our band, we can call it that.
That sounds good. Nobody take that. We're totally going to do that.
Yeah, it's copywritten.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Well, thanks for watching, everybody.
Yeah, let's get out of here. See you all next time.
All righty.
Congratulations. You just survived the post-mortem report. For more information about the show, the hosts, or the things they talked about, check out our super swanky information page at anchor.fm/postmortemreport. Until next time, always remember, good posts never die.
Hey, why is it so dark in here? We still on?
You'll see.
Should I be concerned?
Hit it, Brian.